In 612 BC, the city of Nineveh burned. The Babylonians and the Medes had breached the walls, the palace was falling, the soldiers were dead or running, and somewhere in the complex, the great library of Ashurbanipal, the largest collection of written knowledge in the ancient world, caught fire. It should have been destroyed completely. It wasn't. The fire did something unexpected. The clay tablets inside, thousands of them, were baked by the heat, hardened, preserved in place beneath the rubble, while everything built above them collapsed and turned to ash. The library survived its own destruction. When British archaeologists excavated the site in the 19th century, they pulled tens of thousands of tablets from the ruins, medical texts, astronomical records, mythological epics, legal codes, correspondence between kings. The recovery was considered one of the greatest archaeological finds in history. But not every tablet was placed on public display. Not every tablet was catalogued in the standard record. And one tablet, found not with the library collection, but sealed in a separate vessel, hidden inside a wall, was logged, photographed, studied by 3 scholars across 13 years, and then quietly reclassified, removed from public access, filed under a designation that tells researchers nothing about what it contains. That tablet is the subject of this investigation. The northeast slope of the Quyanink Mound. Austin Henry Layard's workers had been digging through compacted ash for weeks when they broke into a small chamber that had been sealed from the outside. The chamber didn't contain library tablets. It contained one vessel, clay, sealed. The linen wrapping inside had been soaked in bitumen before the vessel was closed. Whoever placed it there had taken significant precautions to preserve what was inside, and significant precautions to hide it. Layard's notebook describes his first examination of the tablet. He writes that the cuneiform was unlike any Sumerian text he had encountered. He writes that the chamber felt cold, in his own words, as if the air had moved without wind. He ordered the tablet rewrapped and removed. He did not examine it again for 11 months. When he finally returned to it, he brought translators. Between 1889 and 1902, 3 independent scholars produced translations of the tablet: Theophilus Pinches, 1889, Friedrich Delitzsch, 1894. A third scholar, whose name has been removed from the British Museum's own records. We know the third translator existed because Pinches references his work in a published footnote. We know his translation was completed in 1902. We know he was attached to a British university. Within a year of completing the translation, he resigned his post, returned to Yorkshire, published nothing further, died in 1907. His widow destroyed his private papers at his explicit instruction. 3 scholars, 13 years of academic engagement with a single tablet, one name erased from institutional records, one man who apparently decided that whatever he had translated was something he needed to take with him rather than leave behind. The tablet was removed from the public catalog in 1903. 1 year after the third translation was completed. It was reclassified as a religious fragment of uncertain origin. Today, it is catalogued as K2486A. If you request it at the British Museum, you will be told it is in storage. You will not be told what it is on it. The photographs taken before reclassification still exist. The surviving translation fragments still exist. And what they show is this: no explanation has ever been offered. Before we continue, the evidence is real. The interpretation is yours. What do you think happened? Leave your theory in the comments. And if you're interested in mysteries that history never fully explained, subscribe and join us for the next investigation. The tablet is roughly the size of a modern paperback, 8 inches tall, 5 wide. The clay is darker than standard Mesopotamian tablets of the period, almost black, which researchers have attributed to an unusual firing process or a different clay source entirely. The cuneiform is dense, more compressed than normal Sumerian script, 12 entries on 2 sides of a single tablet. That compression is unusual. Tablets of comparable significance were typically distributed across multiple pieces. The Sumerians believed that separating dangerous knowledge reduced its potency, that fragmenting the record made the information safer to preserve. Whoever made this tablet disagreed. They wanted the list together, complete, readable in sequence. And the sequence mattered because the tablet is not simply a catalog, it is a ranked catalog. The scribes who produced it assigned each entry a position based on a single criterion: danger. 12 entries, ordered from least dangerous to most dangerous. And the entry at position 1, the entity the scribes considered the most dangerous thing they had ever documented, does not have a name. The space where the name should appear contains only a redaction mark, a small wedge inside a square. The scribes refused to write it. Start at 12, because the ordering is part of what makes this document disturbing. Entry 12 is the Lilu, a being the scribes describe as attaching to sleeping humans and drawing what they call nipshtu, the breath essence, not air, something the air carries. A person fed on by a Lilu wakes exhausted no matter how long they slept. Dreams hollow, memory of the night gone. The scribes ranked this least dangerous because, in their words, a Lilu takes only what regenerates. Researchers who have examined this section note that the symptom profile matches almost exactly what modern medicine calls chronic fatigue syndrome, a condition that 21st century medicine still cannot explain. Entry 11 is the Ardot Lili. More specific, targets young men, takes what the scribes called the seed vitality, described in language that is extremely literal, physical encounters during sleep, escalating frequency, the same victim again and again, until, in the tablet's phrasing, he becomes hollow. What makes this entry unsettling is not the description, it is the echo. Medieval European accounts of the succubus, written more than 2,000 years after this tablet, match the Sumerian description almost word for word. Cultures with no contact, no shared language, no access to each other's records. The same entity, the same pattern, the same progression. Either the human mind generates identical hallucinations independently across every century and every civilization, or the thing is real and multiple cultures documented the same encounters without knowing the others existed. The Lilu and the Ardot Lilu fed on one person at a time. Entry 10 fed on something larger. Entry 10 is the Galu, and this is where the scale of the tablet begins to reveal itself. The Galu doesn't target a person, it targets a place. Homes, wells, gathering spaces. The tablet describes the Galu feeding on what the scribes called the warmth between people, the bonds themselves, not the people, the connections. The argument with no cause, the friendship that cools without explanation. The marker, a persistent sour smell in one corner of a building, unresponsive to cleaning, fixed in location. The scribes' recommended defense? Leave. A Galu could not be driven out. It could only be outlived. The Lilu fed on a body. The Ardot Lilu fed on a man's vitality. The Galu fed on the relationships between people in a space. The scale is increasing. And the middle of the list is where it accelerates. Entry 9 is the Utuku, and here the tablet stops describing individual predators. It begins describing something structural. The Utuku didn't feed on humans directly. It fed on a higher feeder by delivering humans to it. A hunting animal for a larger predator. appearing in dreams, reflections, peripheral vision, guiding people toward decisions, locations, and relationships that delivered them to the actual feeder. The identifying characteristic was specific. The Utuku always offered something useful, advice that arrived too perfectly, a name that surfaced at exactly the right moment, a coincidence that resolved a problem too cleanly. The tablet states that any insight arriving without effort should be treated with suspicion, because the Utuku worked through what felt like fortune. The scribes added a population calculation. Utuku activity in a city's streets at night was proportional to the city's human population, because the Utuku multiplied wherever humans concentrated. Their recorded ratio, 1 Utuku for every 800 humans. Applied to a modern city, the numbers become significant. But the more important detail in Entry 9 is not the ratio.
It is the implication. The Utuku serves something above it, which means these 12 entries are not 12 independent predators. They are a chain. Each lower entry exists in part to feed the entries above it. The tablet is not a list of separate threats. It is a map of a system. Entry 8 is the Rabisu, the crouching one, positioned at thresholds, doorways, the boundary between deciding and acting. The Rabisu feeds on hesitation. Every moment of paralysis at a decision point, the Rabisu draws from it, and the more it draws, the more paralyzed the person becomes. Long-term victims lose the ability to act, to leave rooms, eventually to leave their own homes. At that point, the connection is permanent. Entry 7 is the Lamashtu, the first entry where the tablet explicitly states the feeder is not from Earth. The translation reads, "She who descended from the place above the 7 gates." The 7 gates were specific astronomical positions in Sumerian cosmology. The place above them was not metaphorical. The Lamashtu targets pregnant women and newborns. What she takes is the unformed essence, the part of a new human that has not yet solidified into a personality. The child survives, grows, appears normal, but lacks something that only the mother reliably notices. Entry 6 is the Pazuzu. Most people associate this name with a horror film. The real Pazuzu in the tablet is different. The scribes described Pazuzu as a feeder that ate other feeders, a predator operating above the system, preying on the predators themselves. Sumerian households placed Pazuzu amulets over doorways not to attract him, but to signal to lower feeders that this household was under his protection. The danger, his hunger, was not calibrated. He would occasionally consume the human along with the feeders attached to them. The scribes described him as a useful danger. This is the first point in the tablet where the Sumerians acknowledge something clearly. There is an ecosystem above humanity. It has tiers, and humans are not at the top of it. They are somewhere in the middle, choosing between predators rather than escaping them. Entry 5 is the Asaku, the sickness that thinks, enters through existing illness, attaches to the disease process, directs it. A normal infection resolves in days. An infection harboring an Asaku persists for years, migrating between organs, evolving, never killing the host, never releasing them. The scribes described this as intentional design. The Asaku had adapted to keep the host in a state of permanent low-level suffering because a healthy person offered nothing and a dead person offered nothing. The optimal host was someone who could never quite recover. Researchers reading this section noted that the Sumerian description anticipates the basic mechanism of autoimmune disease, a category that didn't enter medical literature until the 20th century. Entry 4 is the Edimu, the residue of humans who died unfinished, killed before resolution, carrying something unresolved into whatever comes after death.
These residues don't pass on. They attach to bloodlines, feeding on what the scribes called the inherited vitality across generations, the pattern of certain families, the illnesses that skip explanations, the tragedies that repeat without cause, the tendencies that appear in children who never met their grandparents. The Edemu was ranked fourth because its feeding was generational. Once attached, almost impossible to remove. The scribes described a removal ritual. The scribes noted it worked in roughly half of the recorded cases. The first 11 entries on this list feed on bodies, vitality, bonds, decisions, communities, bloodlines. They are significant, they are dangerous, but they are not why the third scholar destroyed his papers. The last 3 entries are why. Entry 3 is the Mushmahu, the serpent of many mouths. Modern scholars who have examined this section describe a change in the cuneiform at this point. The script becomes slightly more compressed, the impressions slightly deeper, as if the scribe was pressing harder. The Mushmahu didn't feed on individuals or families or households. It fed on cities, specifically on what the scribes called the directional will, the collective capacity of a population to choose its own future. A city under Mushmahu influence would lose that capacity gradually. Leaders would make decisions that benefited no one. Citizens would accept conditions their grandparents would have rejected. Institutions would persist structurally while stopping functionally. The scribes attributed the collapse of every great Sumerian city to Mushmahu infestation.
The marker they recorded was specific. The moment when a population stopped expecting its leaders to solve problems and started simply expecting them to remain in place. The point at which endurance replaced expectation. The Mushmahu fed on the scale of civilizations. Entry 2 fed on something the scribes couldn't name. Entry 2 is the Anzu. The tablet's language changes here. Less documentation, more precision. The Anzu is described as originating from beyond the sky, not atmosphere, not space as we understand it. The Sumerian phrase used translates approximately as the place where the stars are not lights, but ships. What the Anzu takes, the scribes couldn't render in words. They drew a symbol instead. A small circle inside a larger circle. 3 lines connecting them. Researchers across more than a century have proposed consciousness, genetic material, electromagnetic signature, accumulated memory. No translation has achieved consensus. What the tablet specifies is this: the taking is permanent, unrecoverable. A person fed on by an Anzu doesn't become tired, doesn't lose their relationships or their capacity for decisions. They lose something else, something only measurable by comparing the person to who they were 5 years before. The change is invisible in the moment, only apparent in retrospect. By the time it's noticed, the feeding is already complete. The Anzu was ranked second because its method was undetectable, and the thing ranked above it was undetectable for a different reason entirely. 12 entries, 11 described, 1 redacted. The space where the name should appear contains only the symbol used in Sumerian administrative texts to indicate a deliberate omission, not an accidental gap, a choice. The translation reads as follows: "There is one above them all. It does not feed as the others feed. It feeds on the act of feeding. It made them. It maintains them. It harvests through them. And it has been present since the first city stood. To write its name is to direct its attention toward the writer. We do not write it. We mark its position. We move forward." Every feeder cataloged in the 11 entries below entry 1, the Lilu, the Galu, the Utuku, the Lamashtu, the Mushmahu, the Anzu, according to this entry, are not independent. They are instruments, constructed by something above them, maintained by something above them, delivering their harvests upward through a hierarchy that the scribes had apparently been spending years mapping before they arrived at the top of it. The 11 entries below entry 1 are not the system.
They are how the system feeds. The scribes then provide the only identifying marker they were willing to record, not a physical description, not a location, a pattern. Appearing across multiple generations, across cultures that never communicated, across events that share no obvious connection. The systematic redirection of human attention away from a fixed point. Every time a society begins to orient toward it, something interrupts. A conflict, a collapse, a discovery that redirects collective focus, a new threat that requires immediate attention. The scribes wrote that the entity at position 1 does not conceal itself because concealment is impossible at its scale. What it does instead is simpler. It ensures there is always something else to look at. The 11 feeders below it, each consuming a different layer of human existence simultaneously, are not competing with it. They are its distraction. The tablet ends with a section that doesn't match the rest of the document. The cuneiform style is slightly different. The depth of impression is different. Researchers who have examined the photographs argue this final passage was added later, possibly by a different scribe, at a different time, for a different purpose. The passage reads, "When the 7th seal is opened, and the marker returns to the sky above the gates, the harvest will be counted. Those who fed will be fed upon. Those who were fed upon will see clearly for the first time." 3 independent astronomers working from celestial coordinates embedded elsewhere in the tablet have argued in published papers that the alignment described, the marker returning above the gates, corresponds to a configuration that occurs approximately once every 26,000 years. The last occurrence, by their calculation, coincides with the period during which the first Sumerian cities were established. The next occurrence is within calculable range. The tablet was sealed in bitumen and hidden in a wall. It was excavated in 1849. It was translated across 13 years by 3 scholars. In 1903, 1 year after the final translation was completed, it was removed from public access. One translator's name was removed from institutional records. One translator destroyed his life's work at his own instruction. The third's translations survive only partially, and K2486A remains in storage at the British Museum, inaccessible to independent researchers, unexplained in any public-facing document. The Sumerians who produced this tablet built the first cities, the first legal systems, the first astronomical observatories. They documented chemistry, surgery, and mathematics thousands of years before anyone else managed it. They tracked celestial bodies with precision that modern researchers still find difficult to account for. And they produced a catalog of 12 entities they believed were operating within human civilization simultaneously. They described each one. They documented how to identify each one. They graded the danger of each one against every other. And the one they placed at the top of that list, the one they considered more dangerous than the sum of everything below it, they refused to name. They marked its position. They described its method, and they noted that its primary technique was ensuring that the people below it were always occupied with something else. The tablet was hidden for a reason. The translations were suppressed for a reason. The name was omitted for a reason the scribes themselves recorded. What remains is the question that the reclassification of K2486A has never answered. 3 scholars studied this tablet across 13 years. 2 of them took significant action to ensure their findings did not survive them. The institutional response was to remove the tablet from public view entirely.
The questions those decisions raise about what the tablet actually contains, about what the third scholar found, about what the Sumerians believed they were documenting, remain open. Not because they cannot be asked, but because the tablet is in storage, and the name at position 1 remains a small wedge inside a square, unwritten, by people who apparently believed that writing it down was the most dangerous thing they could do, and who made sure, across 4,000 years of deliberate preservation, deliberate hiding, and deliberate silence, that the warning reached us anyway.